Hey everybody, Lane here from Maker's Lane. My wife has a shop. She made a request that I'm not an expert in, so I told her maybe she should do this video and I would just help her out. So I'm gonna let her explain everything and let her take it away. Jess?
Hi guys, Jess here from Maker's Lane. I have my own online shop that I run out of our house. It is called The Winking Rose. A lot of the stuff that I make, I often need little contraptions or things to be built to help me make them or to help make my life easier. So that is usually where Lane comes in. You guys might have seen a video he released recently where he showed how he helped me make these cup turners. One of the things we recently started offering, in addition to our tumblers, are the little Mickey head straw toppers that you see in front of me. So these are the straw toppers that we're going to be making today. You can see they have a little space for a straw in there, and they are actually two different pieces. So it's going to be the Mickey head and then the accessory as well. So this is what the finished product will look like once it is on a tumbler and on a straw. I've had several people message me and ask how I make these. I asked Lane if he would help me out and we could go ahead and release a video for you guys to show you how you make a Mickey head straw topper. Let's get started. So now we'll go over the items you're going to need to complete these straw toppers. So you're going to need 2-part epoxy, part A and part B. I purchased it in gallon jugs and then I poured them into these. It makes it a lot easier for pumping the epoxy out. It makes it a lot less messy as well. You're going to need molds, straw topper molds. I actually have purchased 2 separate molds. You can see the difference here. They're gonna have ears inside them, but this one has a little bit bigger ears. This one has skinnier ears. This just really depends on what you want the look of your straw topper to be. This is the one with the bigger ears. You guys can see the ears are a little bit rounded. This is the other type of mold, the one where the ears are not as round. The next thing you're going to need is going to be a mixing cup for your epoxy, a popsicle stick to stir the epoxy, the glitter that you're going to mix in your epoxy, an accessory mold. It has a couple different accessories you can do for your toppers. I'm going to be doing the bow, so this is the mold that we will need for that. And last, you will need a butane torch or some type of heat gun. This is going to help get the bubbles out at the end. This is everything that you will need to make a straw topper. So the first thing we're going to do is mix our epoxy. I've found that for these straw toppers, you will need about 10 cc's of epoxy. And then you're going to want to mix it for about 2 minutes. Just make sure and get it completely mixed through. Make sure to try to get rid of any bubbles if possible. You just want to make sure it's mixed extremely well, or else it will not set right. So as a quick side note, to keep my work area clean, I use these sheets of, it's almost like wax paper. These actually are what I use to print my labels on. So once I peel the sticker label off, this is what I'm left with, and it actually makes a perfect kind of non-sticky work surface. The epoxy will not stick to it. Even if it dries, I can peel it right off, and it's nice because I can throw all this away. So the next step is we are going to add our glitter. For this one, I'm actually going to do a light purple Mickey head. Now you are going to need a lot of glitter for these. I'm gonna add a little bit of white to make it a little bit of a lighter purple. And you're gonna wanna stir this thoroughly too. I can already tell that this is not enough glitter. It should be a little bit thicker than this. It should be a little bit harder to stir. So what can happen if you do not use enough glitter is your ear will end up looking like this. You can see how the glitter has all settled and there was not enough to fill the entire topper. So that's a kind of an example of what it would look like. You can tell this is getting harder to stir now. It's a little bit thicker, so this is exactly what we want. To me, it almost seems like a 1-to-1 ratio for how much epoxy compared to how much glitter you'll need. The next step is I'm going to then, now that I've stirred it and it is ready to go, I'm going to be pouring it in the mold. The first step here when I'm pouring is going to be, you're going to want to try to fill the ears first. You can get air bubbles and air pockets in there, so that's why we want to try to fill those. So you're going to pour it slowly and kind of in a circular motion. You can see how it's kind of sinking into the ears. So that's exactly what we want. And you can see we are almost to the top here and we're almost running out of epoxy, which is perfect. So it does use almost exactly 10 cc's. And then I'm going to use my popsicle stick and just pull out a little bit more where I need it. And then what I will do is I pull the mold apart a little bit, and then you're going to want to tap it on the table several times. I usually do this several times over the course of about probably, I don't know, a minute or two. You want to make sure it sinks in as much as it possibly can into the ears and into any crevices that you might have. So you can see when I do this, there are sometimes bubbles that come to the surface, like that one right there, and it will pop usually on its own, but when I use my butane torch, that will also help any of these air bubbles that you can see are starting to form at the top here. So the next step in order to set this is going to be to hit it with heat. So as you can see, when you hit it with the heat, it gets rid of almost all the bubbles immediately. So I like to try to hit it with the butane torch about 3 times within about a 15-minute time period. As you can see, so it's been sitting here for a few minutes, and even though I just hit it and got rid of all those air bubbles, it now has another set that are coming to the surface. So the setup time for epoxy is usually roughly about 12 hours or so. It will kind of depend on what epoxy you purchase. The setup time on mine is about 8 to 12 hours. I usually don't touch these until 12 hours have passed. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this one. I do have one that's completed here. I poured this one yesterday, so it has been over 12 hours since I poured it, so it has fully set now. So any silicone mold or anything you guys purchase will be very malleable, very flexible. You can peel it, so it will be very easy to get your mold out. And then you now have the finished straw topper. So now once this one is done, it would be ready for an accessory, for me to add an accessory to it. So I will go ahead and show you guys how we do the accessory. So next we are going to go ahead and do the bow. For this one, for my purple one that I just did, I am going to do a yellow bow. You can see, now we needed 10 cc's. So you can see here, I barely even have, I don't even think I have 5 cc's in here, so it might be 2.5 cc's. But I'm gonna mix this, and this probably honestly would get me about 3 bows. So, but I only need it for 1. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix this and pour it. I find that I don't need as much glitter for these. Now with this, you can either pour it, or sometimes I honestly just like to put it on my popsicle stick and kind of drop it in like this. This one you can make a much bigger mess than the other ones because it is such a tiny space. And if you pour it, the epoxy can come out too fast and it can get on the rest of the molds. So if you can kind of see I'm dropping it in, seeing I have about how much I need. I'm gonna put a little bit on this other side here. You want it to basically be flush with the top. So now you can see here, it's pretty much perfect here. There are already bubbles forming, which is what I'm going to use the butane torch for again. So I'm gonna hit it with the torch and we'll get rid of those bubbles, but I'm gonna let it sit for just a minute. And you can kind of do this just like I did with the topper. It's a little bit harder, but I just kind of make sure, and then I will also separate it just like I did with the topper to make sure you've got enough. Now see, I got some on here, but you can just even use your finger. Very quickly also, I did forget to mention, if you buy these molds, they will say, do not use heat on these molds. That's very true. I'm sure if you use the heat for longer than the, millisecond that I use it for, you do need to be very careful so you don't damage your silicone. So this is one that I already have ready to go, and I am going to be putting it on a pink mouse head. I'm going to be using super glue with an accelerator. This is the accelerator, this is the glue. I personally really like the accelerator because when I have it on the bow, it will immediately adhere to the ears. I was using crazy glue to begin with, and it would slip around. It took a long time for me to hold it there. I didn't like it. I would rather something that was instant, but you just have to be pretty careful about making sure you're putting it in the place where you want it to go. So I'm gonna pop my bow out here. I'm going to be setting it about right here. You want to make sure you are not putting it directly above the circle. You want to have it out a little bit just to make sure that the straw can fit fully through there. You don't want to cover up the circle. With the accelerator, you're going to want to make sure you get plenty on the head. So make sure it's pretty wet. It will adhere fairly quickly. So see, it is pretty much completely solid right now. So the very last step that I like to do, this isn't necessary, especially if you use a really strong glue, but I like to add a very, very light coating of epoxy just to give it a little extra shine, and then it also helps the bow to stick even better. The way that I apply this, if you do too much, then as it's setting, it will seep off of the Mickey head and you'll end up having it'll kind of stick. So you want to use a very tiny amount. You can see how much I'm using here. And then I'm just going to very lightly go over the whole Mickey head. So here it is finished. It's pretty much all there is to it. I am going to let this set and dry. So like I mentioned, it'll take about 8 to 12 hours for the epoxy to cure. So I'm gonna let this sit, but there you have it. So there you have it. That is how you make our straw topper Mickey head. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, just feel free to leave them down in the comment section. And hopefully we will be doing some more videos like this going forward.
Yeah, make sure to subscribe because we're going to have a series named Making It in Her Shop for Jess and all of her content.
I receive requests pretty often on my shop for how I make certain things and a lot of the different crafts that I do. So hopefully we can be doing more of these videos in the future.
Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time, I'm Lane from Maker's Lane.
And I'm Jess from Maker's Lane.
You guys have a good one.